Hello everybody, Posey here. This is going to be a different type of video from the norm. If you're familiar with me on social media, you would know I have strong political opinions, of which I generally try to keep off YouTube, but this is going to be an exception to that, because I couldn't help but address this horrendous video by Matt Walsh. Now, if you don't know, Matt Walsh is a conservative podcaster with a fairly large following, and he seems to be quite firmly on the bandwagon against transgender people, seeing as in the video I'm about to react to, he makes ludicrous claims about what trans rights mean and what gender ideology is. That's fun. Now, Matt's video is about a new Ricky Gervais quote-unquote comedy special within which the quote-unquote comedian went on a whole bit mocking the idea of gender identity, and, if I'm honest, straight up being transphobic. You'll see the clip when Matt uses it later. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand what the counter-argument might be. Oh, Posey, it's just a joke, it's just satire. And yeah, I get it. Of course it's a joke. I'm not dull. I just don't think it's funny, and I also think the target of the joke has the right to be offended regardless of the intent. I just can't get behind comedians whose entire shtick is punching down at already disadvantaged people. To me, good satire is punching up at powerful people who actually deserve to be mocked. Like politicians, corporations, and the absurdly wealthy, for instance. Trans people just don't exactly fit into that type of demographic, if I'm being real with you. However, the argument over Ricky Gervais is barely what I want to focus on in this video. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm opposed to what he said in his special, and I'm opposed to Matt defending him, but I mainly want to touch upon how much nonsense Matt says about trans rights, trans people, and gender ideology that is misleading and outright wrong. This man has a huge audience and is spouting out bullshit. To me, it's clear he doesn't want to accurately discuss these subjects at all, but instead paint the things he dislikes as bad as he possibly can to reaffirm the position of his audience, most of whom already agree with his insanity. I don't expect many people to watch this response, or for it to be picked up by the algorithm, but someone has to point out he's being an idiot, so I'll take the challenge. Let's go through this bit by bit. As bad as it is, I'll have his video linked in the description so you can watch it and make sure my response is a fair representation of what he said. Now, without further ado, it's time to delve into the insanity of Matt Walsh.
C.S. Lewis begins his book, The Screwtape Letters, with a quote from, I think it was, if I remember correctly, St. Thomas More, saying that the devil cannot endure to be mocked. And that's why he should be, because that's the appropriate response to evil, is to mock it. That shouldn't be our only response to evil, but that is an appropriate response. That should be a big part of our rebuttal, as it were, to evil, because evil is proud and it's arrogant, haughty, self-involved, narcissistic, and it props itself up above everybody.
That almost sounds like you're describing quote-unquote comedians who think they're hot shit for making the same recycled jokes about trans people over and over again, who then go on to whine about being cancelled when people have the nerve to voice disagreement over what they said, despite them still raking in millions and having the same career opportunities after the fact. Actually, Matt, you yourself come off as arrogant throughout this entire video. You make idiotic, baseless claims about gender ideology and trans rights, and act like it's all factual information despite never backing it up with any data. And trust me, we'll get to that. You act like you're some noble warrior fighting for the truth despite everything you're saying being complete and utter nonsense, but let's keep going.
But it's propped up on stilts, which can easily be kicked and knocked over, which is exactly what we should be doing. And that's why I'm a huge proponent of mocking gender ideology, which is from the devil.
What the hell are you talking about? How is gender ideology from the devil? This is a weird claim to make. Your standpoint seems to boil down to, I don't like the thing, therefore Satan. What a nothing argument.
And ironically, Ricky Gervais doesn't believe in the devil because he's an atheist, but he does a great job of mocking him, including in this. There's a bit from his new Netflix special, which I think was just launched on Netflix yesterday. And this bit's going viral, and of course it has the left very, very angry.
I think angry is a bit of a strong word here. People are annoyed, yes, myself included, but I have not seen one person go into full-on rage mode over his jokes. Even on Twitter, which I would assume you believe is a cesspool of extreme leftist crybabies. Unimpressed might be the best word you could have used, seeing as the general response is one of mockery in and of itself. We, the left as you'd call us, think Ricky's jokes were bad. We don't just think they were insensitive, but we also think they were uncreative and unfunny. If you so strongly believe in the right of stand-up comedians to mock trans people the way he did in his special, you shouldn't have any problem with him being mocked in return. But it's fine, I know you so desperately want to make it look like everyone who disagrees with you is a crying soy jack. So after that, he goes on to talk about Dave Chappelle, another comedian who's also made jokes against trans people in his specials, and I don't think there's anything worth responding to there, as all Matt says is that he wishes Dave Chappelle had gone further, which, no thank you. Going back to Ricky Gervais, though, he plays the clip of what he said in his special, which I'll show you now.
Ricky Gervais really goes for it. Really goes for it. So let's listen to this.
The old-fashioned women. Oh, God. You know, the ones with wombs. Oh. Those dinosaurs. No, I love the new women. I know the new women. They're great, aren't they? You know, the new ones we've been seeing lately. The ones with beards and they're as good as gold. I love them. No, it's the old-fashioned. And now the old-fashioned, they go, oh, they want to use our toilets. Why shouldn't they use your toilets? For ladies. They are ladies. Look at their pronouns. What about this person isn't a lady? Well, his penis. Her penis, you f***ing bigot. What if he rapes me? What if she rapes you? You f***ing turf whore.
Now, the great thing is that, yeah, that's funny, but that is also exactly what the trans activists actually say.
Source, trust me, bro.
Like, he didn't say anything in this imaginary conversation between a sane person and a trans activist. He is fairly representing, and this shows you how absurd it is, that he could stand on stage as a stand-up comedian and simply say exactly what these people actually say, and it's a hilarious punchline, because that's how insane it is. Her penis, like that's what they say. That is 100% what they say. There's absolutely no straw manning going on there at all.
This is a bold claim, Matt. No strawmanning at all? A 100% accurate representation of trans activists? I need you to back this up, buddy. I really do. I'm not entirely sure what you're trying to get at here, but here's what I guess you're trying to imply trans activists believe. Matt, you're pushing the idea that the quote-unquote gender ideologues are saying sex is dependent on gender and that your biology magically adjusts to your preferred identity. Now, I'll grant that such a standpoint is insane and not supported by science at all, but here's the thing, trans activists don't believe this either. Here's what the belief actually is. Your gender identity and your sex are not always in alignment with each other. Sex is biological and is in fact determined by nature upon conception. When you're born, you're assigned male at birth or assigned female at birth. At least most of the time. There's intersex people, but that's a whole other topic. Gender identity is not biological. It is a social identifier. Like it or not, the entire concept of men and women was something we made up and created societal rules and norms around. You having a penis, Matt, although I imagine you don't have much of one at all, does not make you a man. You're a man because of how you present yourself to others and how you perceive your own identity. Trans people do not give a shit about their assigned sex at birth, because it's meaningless to them. If you tell a trans woman she was born male, she will most likely scoff in your face and say she doesn't care, and why should she really? I continue to fail to see why we need to determine gender identity based on genitalia. If you hold true that gender hinges on biological differences like a penis, you could extend this logic way beyond what you're comfortable with. What if someone chops off their penis? Are they suddenly a different gender? If you don't recognize a trans woman as a woman because of her penis, would you magically shift your opinion if her penis spontaneously evaporated? If your penis spontaneously evaporated, would you call yourself a woman? Do you see how badly this logic collapses when it falls under scrutiny, Matt? Do you understand why it's stupid to suggest gender identity is inherently bound to arbitrary biological features? Maybe you do. You know what? I think you understand perfectly, but you're deliberately being disingenuous about what gender ideology is and saying, they think they can choose your sex, is so you can prop up a straw man and knock it down so your fans can cheer you on. That is all this is, pure dishonesty.
And is this the right approach? Like, should we be doing this? Should comedians be up there? Should anyone be making jokes about this? Yes. Absolutely. Because the claims that the gender ideologues are making and what they're doing, it's very serious. It's incredibly damaging. They're hurting people. They're mutilating kids.
For fuck's sake, Matt, who is mutilating children? Literally who? I beg you to look up what the word mutilate means. Let's see. Inflict a violent and disfiguring injury on. There is some very important info in that definition. Violent and disfiguring. Take notes, everyone. Now, what does Matt mean when he talks about child mutilation? He doesn't say, but I can make a pretty good guess. I think he means gender-affirming medical procedures, top surgery, bottom surgery, etc. Careful and delicate bodily reconstruction carried out by trained professionals, more or less. Now, is this violent? Is this disfiguring? The answer is no. It's fucking surgery. Literally any type of medical procedure altering the body could be defined as mutilation with logic this loose and faulty. Is it mutilation for a doctor to perform a surgery removing a tumor from a cancer patient? Is it mutilation to amputate a patient's limb in order to combat a severe infection? Is getting an organ transplant mutilating your innards? Jesus Christ, Matt. I also want to add, all of the procedures I just talked about, like the bodily reconstruction surgery and all that stuff, you're restricted from getting it anyway until you're a legal adult, so Matt's entire argument falls apart.
They're killing people, actually, putting kids on a path to despair and suicide. So it's very serious on one hand.
Oh, go fuck yourself. I know you understand exactly how wrong and disingenuous this is, but I'm going to explain it anyway for the viewers. I imagine you're trying to say that because of the high suicide rates among trans children and teenagers, that must mean being indoctrinated into the evil, devilish gender ideology is the reason why. That is false. Let me quote the Canadian Centre for Suicide Prevention. Transgender people face unique stressors, including the stress some trans people experience when their gender identity is not affirmed. Trans people also experience higher rates of discrimination and harassment than their cisgender counterparts, and as a result, experience poorer mental health outcomes. But granted, Matt is American, so I'll bring up a second source from an official US government website, the National Library of Medicine. The suicide attempt rate among transgender persons ranges from 32% to 50% across the country. Gender-based victimization, discrimination, bullying, violence, being rejected by the family, friends, and community, harassment by intimate partner, family members, police, and public, discrimination and ill treatment at healthcare system are the major risk factors that influence the suicidal behavior among transgender persons. Now, let's see what Matt's sources are for the claim he makes. Let's just check his description. Oh! Looks like he hasn't linked any. I wonder why. So, Matt, it seems to me that the high suicide rates among trans people are a direct result of the societal stigma against them and the harassment, discrimination, and subjugation that stigma promotes. The same stigma you're currently parenting to your hundreds of thousands of viewers. The blood of these kids you claim to care so much about is at least partially on your hands, not on those of the people who strive to accept them. If you shield a trans child from the so-called gender ideologues, that child isn't going to be not trans. Instead, they're going to grow up miserable, wondering why they never feel comfortable and self-fulfilled. No matter how hard you try, eventually this hypothetical trans child will realize their identity. All you'd be doing is making their self-discovery more of a struggle.
But also, their whole worldview is totally insane and ludicrous.
You have failed to explain so far why you think the so-called gender ideologue worldview is so absurd. So let me ask you this, Matt. Why should I take you seriously? After every vague or outright incorrect statement you've already made, why should I listen to anything you're saying and assume anything less than intellectual dishonesty?
Mockery is a very important tool that I think up until recently, especially when it comes to gender ideology, the sane people have been really reluctant to use. It's a tool that we've been very reluctant to use.
Excuse me, what? You don't think anti-trans mockery was something people were willing to do until now? Just recently? Motherfucker, have you ever been on online forums? How much of the internet are you familiar with? Do you even know 4chan, goddammit? What a baffling thing to say.
And it's a tool that the left has, until recently, until they launched their all-out war. Like, comedy is not allowed now on the left. They don't believe in it. But up until that, until they went full Puritan, right? The tool of mockery is something they use to great effect.
Have you ever considered that maybe your enemies think there's more to being funny than relying entirely on edginess and insensitivity to form a punchline? It's an insane blanket statement to suggest the left just doesn't like comedy. Comedy comes in many forms, but for me personally, I just don't have any respect for people who use it as an excuse to be scumbags.
And yes, we should be using it here to again highlight that this is ludicrous. No, we're not going to take it seriously. Okay? The moment you start talking about women with penises, this is not like we're going to sit down and have a conversation about it and take your point of view seriously. Okay, the moment you talk about men having babies.
Sex is not the same as gender. I'm not going to explain it again, but this is a fallacy you use multiple times.
We're not going to dignify that by pretending that there's anything credible in your claim whatsoever.
You don't have to pretend anything. All you have to do is a smidge of research and you'll find out that what you call gender ideology does in fact have a lot of credible backing. I know you don't think it counts because it advocates for an idea you don't like, but that's too bad.
So I wish I could just end it there and say about Ricky Gervais, great job, great routine. It does legitimately take courage to do what he did there.
What Ricky said on his special did not take courage, you dolt. He's rich as hell. He's well established in his industry. He can easily say these sorts of things. Will there be people he pisses off? Yes. Will he have critics? Yes, with myself being one of them. But that doesn't translate to cancellation like you think it does. I strongly, and I mean strongly, doubt that he'll face any serious repercussions for saying the things he did. Despite the contents, Netflix still allowed him to put his special on their platform, and the same was true for Dave Chappelle's specials. If I'm wrong and Gervais really does face consequences, I'm willing to take the L on that, but my hope runs thin.
It shouldn't take courage. This is your job. You make jokes, you're a comedian. Most comedians make jokes about things that are happening in society. This is the role. This is why comedians are important. They're supposed to, poke the sacred cows,
You know what? I have nothing to say about this that James Acaster hasn't already said. So he then goes on this rant about how disapproving he is of Ricky saying he actually supports trans rights outside of his special in a later interview, which I just don't care to address, so let's skip to the next part of the video where he starts making terrible arguments against trans rights. And yes, he does do that, openly. He actively opposes trans rights, so let's hear it.
Because if you just wanted the same rights as everybody else, then you wouldn't need to put the qualifier of it, trans rights. I want trans rights. No, you'd just be out there saying, I want human rights. And any trans person marching saying, I want human rights, I fully agree. You should have human rights. Here's the good news. You have them. So you're fine. No one is taking them from you. You have them. You're good to go. You can put the sign down, go and live your life because you have human rights. You have the same rights as anybody.
Do you believe that all humans have a right to privacy? Because there are American states passing laws right now requiring the identities of trans children and teens to be disclosed by parents and teachers to the state governments. Texas is a good example, the governor of which has also tried to pass a law that would mandate the investigation of parents with trans children for child abuse simply by virtue of their children being trans. If you don't believe me, look this stuff up. I'll have my sources in the description, unlike you. Anti-trans legislation comes up again and again if you do your research. It has become especially prominent this year. Do you consider any of this fair? If you were the subject of these laws, would you want the right to privacy and the right to not have your family investigated for child abuse based on your identity alone? It's very easy for you to say no one wants to take rights away from trans people, because of course you will never experience that yourself, but it doesn't mean nothing like that is happening.
So no, when they march for trans rights, they want more than that. They want rights on top of human rights. Okay, they want to be able to do things that other people can't do.
In a situation where trans rights are fully realized, what exactly do you think trans people would be able to do that cis people couldn't? I know you're going to bring up the washroom issue, but the trans argument for how washrooms should work is that everyone should have the right to use the washroom pertaining to their gender identity. That applies to cis and trans people. Cis women and trans women both go to the women's washroom, whereas cis men and trans men both go to the men's washroom. Everyone is getting what they want here. I don't see the problem.
Prior to trans rights, everybody had the same rules and had to respect the same rules when it comes to bathrooms. You use the bathroom that is in accordance with your biological identity. That's it. It doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter what's going on in your head. It doesn't matter how you identify. Just that's it. Everyone uses the same one. You're coming along and saying, no, I want an exception to that. I want to be the exception.
But there's a huge issue with that, Matt. I'm curious to know, would you extend the argument for washrooms being biological to apply to trans people who've undergone extensive hormone therapy and potentially gender-affirming surgery to the point where their physique is much more like the sex matching their gender identity than the sex they were assigned with at birth? Because if you do count them for the purpose of your argument, that would mean you want someone like this in the women's washroom and someone like this in the men's washroom. Both of those images were of trans people. If they were in the washrooms pertaining to their gender rather than the sex they were assigned as at birth, no one would even know or care, nor should they.
And so that's what the trans activists are doing. They want to be one exception after another. I want to be exception to this. I want to be the exception to that. I want you to reorient society around me. I want you to toss reality, truth, biological science, common sense, decency. I want you to toss all that out the window for me.
Yeah, actually, I do think society should be severely reoriented. Not in the absurd Strawman-esque way you're saying it, but we do need to make serious changes to adjust to our new understanding of sex and gender. There is nothing unscientific about trans people being able to express themselves as the people they truly are, and live life that way with the same rights and opportunities as cis people of their same gender. Again, trans people do not care what you have to say about their assigned sex at birth. You cannot keep bringing that up as an argument, because no one cares. I don't, they don't, and neither should you.
And it's just, this to me is even more frustrating than just having someone who affirms the trans stuff and like everybody else. It's like when you get right up to the edge of just being an advocate for the truth without qualification. You get right up to the edge of it and then you turn back. That's frustrating.
When you say advocate for truth, you actually mean advocate for what you agree with. You have offered no worthwhile argument as to why your standpoint is correct, and the standpoint of not only myself, not only the people I side with, not only the so-called gender ideologues, but also the literal scientific community is wrong. I can't take you seriously when everything you say is either an accidental or deliberate misconstruing of the viewpoint in opposition to what you believe. I can't take you seriously when you blatantly lie and spout ridiculous bullshit to your viewers that can be proven wrong with a quick Google search and 5 seconds of critical thought. You don't promote the truth, Matt Walsh. You advocate for nothing but clownery. Alternatively, in conclusion, I suggest you advocate for D's nuts. And that's the end of his video. Notice how not once did he actually show the quote-unquote angry trans leftists attacking Ricky Gervais. It's almost like he knows genuinely acknowledging the other side would deprive him of his ability to construct a non-existent caricature of his enemies and knock it down for his audience. How quaint! Anyway, I said at the beginning that I have strong political opinions. For today's purposes, my radical hot take was merely that trans people should be respected and allowed to express themselves. I understand a lot of my viewers probably don't care for politics at all, and some may even disagree with any number of my points, but I hope you all realize this video wasn't meant to be an attack on anyone besides Matt Walsh, since I genuinely believe he is speaking completely out of his ass. I'm not sure if I'll do another video delving into politics at all in the near future, but I just felt like I had no choice but to make this one since I really am passionate about where I stand on the issue of trans rights. If by any chance you, the viewer, are trans, you deserve happiness, respect, and the right to be your authentic self to the entire world, regardless of what people like Matt say. And before this video ends, I'm gonna give a quick shout out to one of my trans friends, also named Matt. Sapphire's a cat, who runs a channel with incredible, fantastically drawn and story-driven animatics. You should really check out his work sometime and leave a supportive comment on his videos, as he has unimaginable talent. With that being said, have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!